Okay, well, thank you so much for coming out this afternoon. Just wanted to give kind of an end of the week update. I know the governor has talked a little bit this week about transportation. We obviously have 3 weeks left this session. Our hope is to get a comprehensive road and bridge funding package put together that will provide long-term funding for roads and bridges. We share that priority with the governor, and I think we've got a real opportunity to get that accomplished. The governor spoke earlier today about the need for some money for transit. I think that's the part, particularly the trains, that's a little more controversial with my caucus. We're certainly willing to talk with the governor about that, but we feel that we at least need to leave this session funding what we both agree on, which is our road and bridge infrastructure. And we believe we can do that without a gas tax. And it sounds like from the governor's comments today, like there might be some flexibility on his part. We're glad to hear that. I know last fall he walked away from the gas tax and then has tried to put it back on the table now. So and frankly, our reason for not supporting the gas tax are pretty simple. We know that Minnesotans don't support it, and we know that Minnesotans don't support it because when we have a $900 million surplus, it's not appropriate to take more money out of Minnesota family budgets. So we are committed to getting the roads and bridges funded this session, and we're glad that the governor is willing to be flexible, and hopefully we can get that done.
Mr. Speaker, the governor seemed to indicate that he was open to using some general fund money, using some bonding money. Aren't House Republicans open then maybe to some sort of tax increase to get into this mix for reasons of fairness?
Our position is pretty simple. We believe that the existing revenue that we have, $900 million surplus is enough to accomplish our goals. If we focus that money on what Minnesotans care about, we think we can accomplish a pretty significant long-term plan for roads and bridges. So that's our commitment. I think the governor had in his original plan bonding dollars, as did we. We think that needs to be a vital component of any road and bridge funding package. And I think really that's what Minnesotans expect, the kinds of projects that Minnesotans expect bonding dollars to be used for. Transportation infrastructure, could be water infrastructure, those kinds of things. And I think we both agree on that.
There's about 3 weeks left in the legislative session, and the conference committee, Transportation Conference Committee met today for the first time in weeks. There apparently hasn't been the high-level talks with you and the governor and the majority leader. When can we expect to see movement, discussions, negotiations that could lead to a transportation deal?
Sure. We had a very good conversation earlier this week. The governor and I at breakfast, we talked about some of these different ideas for funding roads and bridges. We let him know what our priorities were. He shared his with us. We had a very good conversation. The conference committee did meet and had a very good meeting. I think both chairs of the conference committee have committed to meeting at least a couple of times next week. And I think that's exactly the kinds of conversations that need to be happening here in St. Paul to get us to a conclusion and to get us to some compromise on how we fund our roads and bridges.
The governor said today that the speaker is always about what he's against, but he's not telling us what he's for. So you're against the gas tax, but what would you support for funding for the $600 million a year?
Well, our funding package for roads and bridges is pretty simple. We take existing revenue and we take funding sources that we think are due to folks using the road and bridge infrastructure. So we take the auto parts sales tax, we take rental car sales tax and leased vehicle sales tax, and we rededicate those into the road and bridge fund for funding roads and bridges. I mean, the amount of money that we're proposing to use that goes into the general fund now would be just a little over 0.5% of what's going into the general fund, and to fund something that's everybody's number one priority, we think that's super reasonable. And frankly, if we can't find 0.5% or a little more than that out of the general fund to spend on roads and bridges, we're not committed to solving our road and bridge funding problem.
Do those add up to $600 million a year?
Well, it's a little over $300 million just from the auto part sales tax, and I think the others add up to a little bit more. To get to the whole thing, you need to use some other sources. We're using bonding and some other things to be part of that as well. We're also requiring that MnDOT find some efficiency in their efforts. That was part of the deal back in 2008, was that MnDOT find efficiency in the projects that they're working on, and they never have lived up to those promises from 2008. The last time the gas tax was increased. So we think that they can do that. And the governor has actually indicated that those efficiencies, in the past, last year he was indicating that those efficiencies are reasonable, and he thinks we can find that within the MnDOT budget.
One follow-up on that. Are you willing to walk away from all of this?
I'm not willing to say that anybody should walk away from this. And I'll also call, the governor and I have a great relationship, and I think we can get this accomplished. Senator Bach and I have a great relationship. I think we can solve this, this session. And I hope that nobody's talking about walking away from this, because it's really important that we frankly get this accomplished this session. And I think everybody's committed to that. And I think when folks are watching from home, they're listening to everybody being committed to solving the road and bridge funding problem. I hope, and I'm sure that they hope, that nobody's talking about walking away without accomplishing it. And we're committed to getting it done.
Mr. Speaker, the governor today said it's going to take a variety of funding sources, and he's willing to accept some things he doesn't agree with. Are you willing to do the same?
I told him earlier this week that we'd be willing to listen to anything, and I gave him some ideas that I'm probably not going to share with you right now of other ways that I think we can close the gap. And I was very open with him, and I think indicated to him that we are willing to, and I'm really glad to hear that the governor is as well. And that's what gives me the optimism that we can get this done this session.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the idea of using bonding dollars, the governor says he needs to know how much in your bonding bill you are going to want to designate for transportation. You haven't done that yet. How soon can we expect that number?
Well, we put out a bonding target of $600 million as an initial target a few weeks ago when we put our budget targets out. I reminded the governor that we haven't even seen a target from the Senate yet, let alone the details of their bill. So we have plenty of time yet to vet and work through all of the details of what would be included in a bonding bill. But I have said from the beginning, and I stand by, that what we want to put together is a bonding bill that almost every member of the legislature can vote for, because it's full of projects that are seen to be of statewide or regional significance. Things like transportation infrastructure, whether it be water infrastructure, HEPR at the universities and at the MnSCU campuses, projects that people really can get behind, not things that are considered wasteful spending. So if we can focus on that, I think we'll find a target of general obligation bonding that can include some money for roads and bridges, and even the governor's plan includes that. So we're not very far apart.
Senate's going to roll out their bonding bill in detail on Monday. How soon can we expect at least how much of your bonding bill you're going to propose to be dedicated to transportation?
I think that's a fair question, and I certainly think that we can talk about how much of our bonding bill we want to put towards transportation. I have, and my caucus is, and I've indicated to Senator Bach and the governor that our priority is using the $900 million that's sitting on the bottom line as surplus for roads and bridges and for taxes. Those are our priorities, and we want to work on those first and make sure we can get to an agreement on those before we get into how much money are we going to borrow and pay for other things. We've got a $900 million surplus. Let's figure out what we're going to do with that first before we worry about borrowing more money.
So bonding is dessert?
Is the sales tax in the metro area off the table, an increase?
We didn't. The governor and I didn't talk specifically about the sales tax. Some of the things that they want to pay for with the sales tax are controversial. Specifically, Southwest Light Rail. Our members do not support that. We believe that the public does not support that. We're willing to talk about that, but I think it complicates the discussions as we get close to session. So, our encouragement will be, let's stick to things that we all agree on, like roads and bridges, and we might have to leave transit and more specifically the trains for another time.
Why not allow metro legislators to make that decision about transit that it affects people who live in the metro? If they want to tax themselves for transit, why shouldn't they be given that option?
I think we might be open to a referendum type vote to allow for an increase in the sales tax. that's something we might be open to. But at this point, I think we need to see that the dollars are being spent wisely and they fit in as part of a bigger plan. We've got some real concerns with Met Council and the way the dollars are being spent now. We don't know that there's an overarching plan that really is efficient and makes a lot of sense. And these things are controversial. I don't know that I've gotten a single email all session in support of Southwest Light Rail. So it is controversial, and it's going to be difficult if that has to be part of the solution. Now, we did find out earlier today that 7 senators, DFL senators, have sent a letter to the DFL chair of the bonding committee in the Senate saying that they will not vote for a bonding bill unless it includes $130 some odd million for Southwest Light Rail. That's not the kind of flexibility that we want to see in the final weeks of session here. And if the Senate is going to be looking at using bonding dollars to fund Southwest Light Rail, it will be controversial. It's our understanding that the bonding chair is likely not going to include Southwest Light Rail as part of a bonding bill that comes out of the Senate. So I don't know how much effectiveness those 7 members are going to have. But if they literally hold to their commitment, it's going to be tough to pass a bonding bill in the Senate if it doesn't have Southwest Light Rail in it.
Do you think putting another 300,000, 400,000, 500,000 cars on the road in the next 25 years in the metro area is a good idea?
I don't know that's either going to happen or it's not, and I don't know that putting a little more money into a train is going to prove effective. You look at the numbers that we've seen from North Star recently, $22 per trip as a subsidy. You're talking about $44 round trip for somebody to get from St. Louis Park to Minneapolis to work and back per day. $44. That's the subsidy. That's on top of what they pay for their ticket. Multiply that out by every day that they go to work during the month. You're at $900 a month of subsidy to get somebody back and forth to work. We can buy a brand new Mercedes for every person that rides North Star and pay for their gas and still have money left over. That's how inefficient moving people by rail is. And the sad part is you can't pick up the rail and move it if the need changes in the future. And Southwest Light Rail is even more inefficient in that they have to put down new rail for it. The North Star was at least running on existing rails.
Are you ready to put numbers on how you plan to split up the surplus between tax cuts and transportation?
I think we're getting close to that. Obviously, that conversation will include the Senate Democrats. We are to the point now. We passed our last budget bill off the House floor yesterday. Mechanically, how this happens now that we have all the bills in conference committee will be to set for the leadership from the Senate and myself to set joint targets for each conference committee. That's really where we'll learn how much is going to be divided between tax relief and transportation, and then if there's any small funding that's needed in any other bills.
When's that happen?
I think we'll start those conversations likely Monday of next week. At least my office is going to reach out to Senator Bach and talk to them about meeting on Monday of next week to begin those conversations.
Speaker, just to clarify on Southwest Light Rail, obviously you're not a fan of the project, you repeatedly criticize it, but are you saying that your caucus is insisting on that project be killed in order to pass a transportation bill, or simply skeptical of any funding for it?
The reality is that Southwest Light Rail does not have enough votes to pass the House of Representatives. I don't have a single vote for it in my caucus. That makes things very difficult if Democrats are going to demand that they must have funding for Southwest Light Rail.
Are you demanding that it doesn't have that project be explicitly killed?
I just don't have any votes for it. And the governor has said numerous times that Southwest Light Rail or projects like it have to be part of a final solution. Well, there's a reason he says that, because he knows that they don't have enough votes to pass on their own. So obviously they need to be included with some roads and bridge funding. Road and bridge funding has 70 or 80% support across the state, where Southwest Light Rail has far less than 50% support. So let's not miss an opportunity to do what Minnesotans want and expect us to do with the resources that we have, and that's fund our road and bridge infrastructure.
So when can we expect to see some progress in the transportation area?
I hope next week. My hope is that we can actually set joint targets next week, and I think that'll give everybody an indication of where we're at and what this session will look like. I would hope that nobody's talking about that we won't get things accomplished. Anybody who's saying that at this point, obviously has ulterior motives. They don't want to get anything accomplished. They would rather not accomplish anything so they can blame somebody else for it. That's not Minnesotan, and it frankly doesn't serve any of our constituencies well. So let's roll up our sleeves, get our work done, and have a successful session, and we have to do it together.
Politically, do you have to take home transportation funding?
You know, I think everybody does. I think everybody does.
Mr. Speaker, on another topic, if that's okay, the Health and Human Services bill last night, you put into that bill things specifically the governor is calling again today garbage, says that they are political charades that you're running because of the election coming up, and you're writing your political literature right now. Would you respond to that?
Well, we have members that support a lot of different issues, and we put up amendments and take votes on those issues every year. It's happened every year since this state's been here, so it's nothing new. You know, obviously we know that the governor doesn't support all of those initiatives. We think that they're common sense things, but you know, we know that they're probably not likely to survive conference committee because the governor doesn't support them, and that's fine.
Anyway, even though you know they're not going to survive, you've also got transgender policy. You've got a number of no, it's not in the bill, but I'm saying all through this session you have all of these bills that the governor says you are just playing with for political reasons.
Well, you know, if the governor can't tell that we're focused on tax relief and transportation, I don't know how many of these press conferences I need to do during a week, but this is number 4 now. You know, beginning of this week, the governor's deputy chief of staff tweeted out that or not even the beginning, I think it was yesterday, tweeted out that I don't do press conferences. That was my 3rd one this week. This is number 4. So they obviously aren't super engaged in the legislative process if they aren't paying attention to whether or not we have press conferences.
The governor said that he's made a concerted effort to reach out more to the legislature and individual members and leadership. Does that, in your experience, does that hold true?
You know, we are seeing, I know there were a number of members over at the residence yesterday. There's one more going back today. I think the meetings are specifically designed to try to peel some of my members off for a gas tax. He's not going to have luck doing that. My members don't support it. My members don't support it for a very simple reason. Minnesotans don't support a gas tax. When we have a $900 million surplus, taking more money out of Minnesotans' pockets to pay for something we already have the money to pay for just doesn't make sense, and it hurts Minnesotans. So that's why my members don't support it, and the governor's not going to have a lot of luck with that, but I'm encouraged that he's talking to people, and the more he talks to people, the more he's going to find out that a gas tax isn't going to happen this session. And the reason is Minnesotans don't want it to.
Do you support the drug sentencing agreement that was announced this morning?
You know, I have not seen all of the details of what's included in that. It's encouraging to hear that there is some level of agreement between law enforcement, the prosecutors, the county attorneys, all those folks. At least they've been working really hard to come to this agreement. So we'll take a hard look at it. I'm sure if there is a real agreement and members can get behind it, I'm sure it'll pass fairly easily. Yeah. We did have real concerns about the Sentencing Guideline Commission recommendations, but they were also limited in what they could do through the Sentencing Guidelines Commission without putting something into statute. So an agreement is what really needed to happen, and although I haven't seen all the details, I'm encouraged that they're to that step.
Mr. Speaker, you say if there's a real agreement. Are you thinking there might not be?
Well, I think there is. That's what they're all telling me. I just haven't seen the details of it yet. So I'm encouraged that they are saying there is an agreement.
Chairman Cornish wasn't there. Is there a reason for that?
He was the one that actually told me there was an agreement. I think he just probably went home last night. So we were here until 2 o'clock in the morning in session, but I think he probably headed for home, and that's why he wasn't there. But he was the one that originally told me there was an agreement, and he seemed encouraged by that yesterday when I learned that from him.
Do you have any doubts or concerns about making your members take a vote like that could be viewed as relaxing sentences for drug offenders?
You know, I haven't seen all the details, and I defer to my chairs who specialize kind of in those issue areas to analyze the policy in the agreement and see if it's something that we can live with. But we're encouraged that they've been talking and encouraged that they come to an agreement amongst themselves at least. That'll make our job a lot easier. Very good. Thank you all.
Thank you, Mr.